Thank you very much, Brother King, and all of the brothers that participated. So nice to be able to look back on a life that's so full of rich and rewarding experiences, isn't it? Now our branch coordinator, Brother Viv Moritz, is going to try to continue giving us a few highlights of what happened since World War II, or particularly the year 1945. Thanks, Brother Moritz.
(1945) was the year World War II ended. It found Jehovah's people in this country free from the ban, free to go about doing their work. But in the post-war world, of course, there were quite a number of difficulties. At the time, the branch overseer, Brother Philip Rees, was disposing of farms and properties that the society had built up in the earlier times, and the disposal of all of these caused a number of problems, because many of the brothers who lived on these farms, of course, had devoted their lives to the kingdom work, and it wouldn't be just right to say to them, well, goodbye, go out now into the pioneer work. And so he was working on making these many adjustments. But then in 1946, Brother Rees was taken to the first international class at Gilead. And he went to the 8th class back then. That same year saw the arrival of 2 Gilead graduates, one from the first class at Gilead to serve in Australia. And we'd never seen any Gilead graduates before. And Brother Ben Mason, Floyd Garrett, arrived in that year. The end of 1946, we had an international convention held in the Sydney Town Hall. Brothers came from all over Australia. And that was a year, many of you will remember, when we received that wonderful new book, Let God Be True. Yes, this was to help 1 million people into the truth around the world, and 15,000 in this country. And that book we got right at the end in December of 1946. We also received a new book called Equipped for Every Good Work. And that was a marvelous help to us, too, in the Theocratic Ministry School that had just gotten started. And so we were ready for post-war expansion. Or were we? Well, that was a question. After Brother Rees went to Gilead, Brother Laurie Wills served for a time as acting branch overseer. And Brother Noor came then to Australia early in 1947. Brother Wills is still faithfully serving here with us, and we'd like to ask him a couple of questions about that time. I believe, Brother Wills, you went around to all the capital cities of Australia with Brother Noor, and he gave a talk there in 1947. Would you tell us a little of the background of that and what the situation really was?
Well, undoubtedly this was the big feature in 1947 when Brother Noor came out here. We were all looking forward to it, I might say with a certain amount of trepidation. We didn't know whether we'd get our dismissal notices or what, but it didn't happen, and he was very kind to us. But he said, the work is not going ahead here, there's something wrong, we've got to do something and look into it. So there was much talking and heart-searching. And then he said, we're going to visit as many brothers around Australia as we can. So Perth was the first place visited, then Adelaide, Melbourne, Launceston, Brisbane, and then Sydney. Well, as many of you brothers here would know, and possibly many of you attended the talk of Brother Noor and Brother Henschel, and you know what that talk contained. Actually, I think it was called Mercy and Forgiveness, and Brother Noor outlined the work here and how it wasn't going ahead. Things weren't right. There was a certain amount of compromise during World War and a few years before, and we weren't strictly neutral. Brothers had been brought in from the pioneer work to engage in certain commercial enterprises, and Jehovah evidently wasn't blessing the work, so something had to be done. He was very concerned. And that talk, and particularly the resolution that followed and was carried by all the brothers then in meeting, evidently cleared the way for that to be done. Acknowledgement was made of wrongdoing, of a certain amount of uncleanness, of not strict neutrality and compromise. And the brothers throughout the country resolved to push on with the work ahead now, praying Jehovah's forgiveness and let us make an advancement like the rest of the world. And that's what happened, and Brother Knorr, when he left, said, I'm greatly relieved. I think the work will go ahead here. We'll see what Jehovah will do from now on. We'll be keenly watching Australia.
Well, it seems to have gone ahead, doesn't it?
Well, it might have started a little slowly, but then there was the Gilead graduates coming down, the circuit work, the district work, and all these other activities gradually strengthened the brothers who had been weakened during this period of time. There's no doubt about that. And we're glad to say, yes, it has gone ahead, and look today at the result.
And looking back now from 1983, and maybe looking ahead, what do you think of it now, Brother Wills?
Well, looking back, we knew things weren't right back there, but we knew Jehovah was guiding and directing his organization. We knew that in due time things would be righted, and we knew progress would be made. As we look back, certainly we can say Jehovah's the one that is directing his organization worldwide. He knows what's wrong, he knows what's to be done, and let's follow the leading in doing that. As an example, for instance, Jehovah directing the organization. When we bought this property in 1939, this 100 acres, nobody knew much about it. What are we going to do with that place out there? And in the years that followed, we tried to sell it several times, and we couldn't get a taker. Today, we evidently know why.
Yes, I'm sure we do. Thank you very much, Brother Wills. Well, it's true. Back there in 1947, a whole lot of new things were started. Brother Garrett became the branch overseer. Brother Knorr instituted new arrangements here that had already been instituted elsewhere. Probably many of you remember the circuit assemblies beginning. In 1947, 1948, we had our first district convention, and we've been having them every year ever since. 1947 was a year when a new branch was formed in New Zealand, and they took over the work there from the Australia branch. And that was a year, too, as we heard, when another great batch of pioneers and full-time servants went off to Gilead, including Brother and Sister Barry. And in later years, a number of groups were to go to Gilead. Well, 1948 saw 3 more Gilead graduates come to Australia. And I remember going to the assembly, the district assembly that year in Sydney, and hearing some new voices. They were Brother Cutforth, from whom we heard today, and Brother Smart, who worked here and in Papua New Guinea later on, before his death just recently in Canada, and Brother Don McLean, whom all of you know, I think. And Brother McLean, would you tell us a little bit about the feeling back there when you and Brother Smart and Brother Cutforth came to Australia, and what you thought about it all and what you were supposed to do?
Well, perhaps I better start a little earlier than that, Viv. Back in 1947, we were in Gilead, and we had a series of lectures given to us by Brother Fran, sort of a running commentary on the tour of Brother Knorr of the Pacific and Hawaii. Well, he got down to the South Pacific, and we were hearing this report read to us. He got to New Zealand. It was a very pleasant report. And then he finally got to Australia, and Brother Franz was reading along, and we were very interested, and then our faces began to drop, and we looked rather shocked at each other, and we heard this doleful report of what was happening in Australia, as Brother Wills just mentioned. And then we graduated from Gilead, were assigned to our various places in Canada, circuit work. And then one day I opened up a letter from the office, and it said, in harmony with the expansion of Jehovah's work earthwide, you are assigned to Australia. It was incredible. I couldn't believe my eyes. So Brother Bob Smart and Brother John Cutforth, 3 of us, met in New York, and we sailed for Australia. Just before leaving, Brother Knorr spoke to us about the conditions here, and he said that what had happened, and you're going to hear a lot of interesting stories when you get there. You find the brothers will probably break down telling you some of these stories, but we'd like you to kind of listen with pleasant tolerance, but don't pursue the matter. Change the subject when you can, and try to get their minds on the important work of preaching. So that's exactly what happened, Biff. We found many brothers actually wept telling us the stories of what happened here. And when we arrived, there were approximately 3,600 publishers in Australia.
Yes, and now almost 36,000. So that's quite an increase, isn't it? Well, what do you think now, Brother McLean? You've been around the whole country since then, district work and circuit work. You pretty well know the brothers and the place from one end to the other. And now you're here in Bethel, and the family working in the office in this fine new place. What do you think about it all now?
Words fail me. Truly they do. Today was the joy of my life, Viv, to see the dear brothers coming in the office there, and I was amazed at how many I knew. I didn't realize I knew so many people in Australia. But brother and sister after brother and sister came in, and we shared experiences and said hello to each other. And to see this beautiful complex and to have the joy of this wonderful Bethel family. It's a marvelous family, brothers. Just the gems of our brothers here. We have a lovely atmosphere, a beautiful place to live, and to see the thrilling expansion taking place is just beyond words.
Well, thank you very much. We too appreciate the very fine, faithful service Brother McLean and his wife June have rendered to all of us here in Australia in those years. They've certainly been a marvelous encouragement to us, haven't they? Well, as we look over the history from those years forward, a lot of things have happened. 1950 saw an international convention in New York, saw the release of the New World Translation of the Christian Greek Scriptures. What a thrill it was to get our hands on that. And how that changed our vocabulary over the years. And in the 1950s, a great many thrilling things took place. 1951 saw a change of branch overseer. Brother Jarris arrived. Brother Garrett had gone to New York in 1950, and he married there and remained in the United States, where he's still serving faithfully in the full-time work with his wife. And Brother Moyle took care of the branch for a while, and then he went off to Gilead in 1951. Brother Jarris took over, and that was a time of expansion in the Pacific Islands, particularly in those days. New Caledonia, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands were all under the Australian branch still, and Brother Jarris paid particular attention to some of those areas. And it was a time, too, when we started what was called unassigned territory work, working out into the areas where congregations didn't hold a territory. And we had some thrilling experiences, didn't we? And you know, some years the increase in this country was up to 19% in a year. We've never seen such figures since. And Jehovah was gathering in the great crowd of people. 1955 saw the special talks. We've been having one in April every year since then. 1956, Brother Norr came back for a visit. We had a national convention in Sydney, and we had the grand total of 8,149 in attendance at this convention for the whole country. It was 1957 when we passed the 10,000 mark in publishers, and what a thrill that was. By this time, Brother Jarris had left, and Brother Held was the branch overseer. And soon we came to 1958, when that grand assembly was held in New York, in 2 stadiums concurrently, the largest convention ever held, and 2 plane loads at least left from Australia for that convention, and a number who were in those planes stayed to go to Gilead. And that's when we left Australia back there in 1958, along with a number of others. Well, 1960 came, 1961. Many of you brothers remember the Kingdom Ministry School and how we looked forward to that. Brother Walters came back from Gilead as the first instructor, and all the congregation overseers got to come to Bethel to go to school for a month. And later on that was expanded to other brothers, in the Kingdom Ministry School is still being held from time to time, and all of the elders are getting the benefit of it. 1963, do you remember the International Convention in Melbourne, the Sheep Pavilion? Well, we had 13,142 at that convention, and that was a peak attendance in those days. 1968 brought us the Truth Book, and what a thrill that was. And now 15,000, as we said, had come into the truth in Australia in 22 years with the aid of the book Let God Be True. What would happen now with the Truth Book? 1970, 1969, another international convention in Melbourne, and now we had 26,075 in attendance, twice the figure of 1963. 1970 saw us pass 20,000 publishers in Australia. 1971, 1972 saw a grand new arrangement. and elders were appointed throughout the country, and in place of the presiding overseers, we had a body of elders. But then 1972, 1973 saw the need of more expansion. Now our Bethel home at Strathfield, that had served faithfully since 1929, needed to be enlarged. And so 32,000 square feet of space was added to the original 8,000 square feet, making it very, very much larger. Now, just to give you an idea, this building that we have here has 150,000 square feet. That is more than 3.5 times the size of the one at Strathfield, and if you count in the services buildings and the other outbuildings we have, why, this is 4 times what we had at Strathfield. But back there, it was a big expansion to take place in 1972 and 1973. 1974 saw the first assembly hall in Sydney. What a lot of work was done to start the ball rolling and get an assembly hall, and what a thrill it was for the brothers in Sydney. Now, of course, we have them too in Adelaide, then Perth, and finally Melbourne just recently had their assembly hall dedicated, and wonderful expansion has taken place. 1974 saw the formation of other congregations in other languages. We call them ethnic congregations, and now we have whole circuits: Italian, Greek, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and many other groups in different languages. Probably we could say that the Australian field is more cosmopolitan than most territories of the world because of all the different language groups we have, and many of them have their own congregations and are very happy to be able to hear and understand the truth in their own language and preach it to others in their language that are here in this country. 1976 brought us to the branch committee arrangement. Brother Wilson, who had been serving as the branch overseer, became the coordinator then. 1978, we came to the international conventions. We had one in Sydney, one in Perth, and now more work was being done on expanding Bethel. Well, a big attempt was made to expand the place in Strathfield. Plans were drawn up, but it was 1978. Brother Barry was here along with some of the other brothers from the governing body. They came out and looked at this property, and it was decided that this would be the spot for the new branch building. So 1978, 1979 saw the start of work on this, and here we are at last with our fine new building being dedicated today. 1982, this year, we had district conventions, and we got another new book, You Can Live Forever in Paradise on Earth. Do you know, already we've shipped out around 150,000 of that book. 15,000 came into the truth with the aid of the Truth Book in 22 years. The Let God Be True book in 22 years, and now the Truth Book in 14 years saw another 15,000. If we look back to 1945, we had 3,489 publishers in the country. The memorial attendance was 4,457 in that year. In 1983, in February, we just reached a new peak of 35,975. And last year, the memorial attendance went up to 67,724. In those years, that's more than a 930% increase. The blessing of Jehovah really has made rich, hasn't it? Now, Sister Maud Johnson came to Bethel back in 1923, and she's still here. And when she came to Bethel in Australia, there were 200 publishers. Sister Johnson, you came from New Zealand at the time, and you married the branch overseer, Brother Johnson. And now you've served faithfully with us to this day here in Bethel, 1983, 1923, that's 60 years, isn't it? Would you look back on all that, and you look at what's happened here, how do you feel about it all?
One has wonderful memories, and they're very precious, aren't they?
They certainly are.
Well, I remember the early days in Melbourne, and it's hardly credible, but really the town of Geelong had no one in the truth there. Another sister and I took an early morning train to Geelong, and you put the whole day in putting out window cards for a public lecture. And now what's happening in Geelong? 3 congregations are there. There wasn't anyone. So it's wonderful to see that happening and to know that Jehovah's blessing does make so rich. And then there was Queensland, practically untouched. Just a few families in the truth up there. And of course the literature came to Sydney, then was transshipped to Melbourne, which meant double handling. So that's why the branch was moved to Sydney.
Queensland was closer.
And Queensland. So sunny Queensland is a really rich country today, isn't it, truth-wise?
Truth-wise, yes.
Yes. So these are wonderful thoughts, and they make one appreciate more and more the workings of Jehovah that make it so rich. Reminds me of, there was an incident they reprinted in the Watchtower recently of something Brother De Secker said some years before to a brother. Brother De Secker had by then been 40 years in the full-time service. And this brother had made some comment about it. And in his broken English, Brother De Secker said, "It's not what you had done, it's what you're going to do that counts."
So I guess now it's what we're going to do that
That's
counts, isn't it?
It's up to each one of us, isn't it?
Thank you very much, Sister Johnson. And so we're very happy today to see you all here. Those of you who've had such a long time in the truth and worked to make all of this possible and to bring the truth to many, and to be here today is certainly a joy to us all at the dedication of our new branch. And we can certainly agree with this Proverbs 10:22, where it says, again, the blessing of Jehovah. That is what makes rich.
Thank you, Brother Moritz and others. That's a very informative flashback of events, bringing us up to date now on our work here. Well, it looks as though Brother Lloyd has brought most of the brothers who served on the building committee up here with him. And the question now is raised, what indications are there that Jehovah has blessed our move to Ingleburn? How has this been made manifest during the actual building program? So we'll look forward now with interest to hearing what these brothers can share with us.
On Wednesday of this week, the Sydney Morning Herald carried an article about our dedication program and started off with these words: "With hardly a breath of publicity, a new headquarters for Australia's Jehovah's Witnesses, probably the most striking functional building ever created for an Australian religious body, will open on Saturday." How did such a complex like this get a start? Well, strangely, it started off with the idea in Strathfield of building 12 new bedrooms. And if you can have a look around you, that's the result of 12 new bedrooms. The idea was first presented back in 1977 with the visit of Brother Henschel as the zone overseer. We felt we were getting short of bedrooms in Strathfield, and the idea was presented to Brother Henschel and asked permission to build 12 or so new rooms. His immediate reaction was, well, why not take down the building here and put up a 5-story new building? So immediately we started to plan. Brother Dennis Flack, the architect, was asked to come in. We prepared drawings, submitted them to Brooklyn and to the council. The governing body approved, the council did not. They said, if you'd like to consider a 3-story building, we may approve. So it was back to the drawing board again. But it just didn't seem right that we should be covering the entire area of our Strathfield property with a building, because that would have meant that if we had have gone ahead with a 3-story building. In the meantime, we started to think about the property here at the farm. We looked at other areas around Sydney, came to the conclusion that this was the best location, but then we worried about the zoning of this area. Would the governing body approve? So we went ahead, made a presentation to the council here in Liverpool, and they said, yes, it's the perfect building for this zoning, just the type of building we're looking for. So there we felt that that was Jehovah's direction. The governing body also gave their approval, and at the end of 1978, the beginning of 1979, we had a number of members of the governing body here, looked at the site, and this is what was chosen. At that time, or prior to that time, a building committee had been selected, and as we examined the area here, we decided we needed about accommodation for about 200 permanent workers. But at that time, we had one farmhouse with 2 or 3 bedrooms. So we thought what we have to do is basically build a Bethel home in order to build a Bethel home. And we were 1 year in preparation. We prepared for a number of caravans to be bought in for our married couples. We bought a large school building, which we turned into a dormitory. A sewerage plant had to be installed. Our first major project was what you may have seen this morning, what we call the services building, and that housed our cafeteria, our kitchen, for quite a number of years. We prepared a carpenter shop, boilers maker shop, batch plant, and it became almost embarrassing as everybody would ask, well, how's the building going? And a year later we said, we haven't started yet, because we were making preparations to house our brothers. Then we started to peg out the building. And perhaps at this point we might like to just ask Brother Gill what he thought about it when he saw the building pegged out.
Well, this gave me a very big shock. Brother John Meredith and Brother John Griggs had come out and set the building out. We were living in Strathfield at the time, and when I came out with some brothers, they explaining where it was. We were standing in the paddock, and one of the Johns, just disappeared over the hill. And we tried to stand on toes, on boxes, and couldn't see just how far he had gone, and thought there was a mistake, and the brothers checked it out. We could hardly believe how long the building was going to be. Sure, it was right, and that's how long. And then we realized not only how long, but then it had to stretch toward you, and it's nearly as far stretching out. And at that stage our eyes were starting to boggle, because Brother Dennis Flack had done the drawings, but did he really know how big this thing was that he was drawing? So brothers have said to me over the years, you know, we admire the faith of the building committee, because none of you brothers are that experienced. How come you took on such a building? Well, brothers, we'll be honest, we didn't know either. We didn't know how big the building was going to be or what it is today. But we can really say that Jehovah God has been behind it. The way things have developed, brothers coming forth, as you'll hear later, to volunteer, and to see the finished result today. Our faith in Jehovah God has grown. The building committee, we're all gone now, by Brother Lloyd and Brother Logan here, but I think there's nearly tears in our eyes to see just how well the building has been finished and how much Jehovah has blessed the project.
Thank you, Brother Bill. Probably at that time most of us felt what is expressed in the songbook in song number 117, when Noah was assigned to build an ark. It says, did he reject that assignment since he had never built arks before? No, but he made good use of God's mercy. And that's the way that we felt as we contemplated the building. No one on the building committee had really had very much experience in large projects like this. But with faith in Jehovah, many times we seem to just reach the end of the road, a dead end, you might say, of how are we going to do this, where are we going to get brothers to do this project or that project. But every time, just when we felt that we need to pray, which we did many, many times, Jehovah raised up people just when we needed them. And that's probably been the most outstanding aspect of our building here. We could tell you a lot about the building itself, but probably the most outstanding factor has been the way that you brothers have responded, both by your prayers, your monetary donations, and primarily the brothers coming in here to work. Brothers from all over Australia responded. Many sold their homes, gave up their businesses, left their families, and came in here and lived with us for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Some brothers came from all over Australia by buses. Some spent 2 weeks here. Many from Western Australia came and spent a month with us. Then brothers came in on a regular basis who had certain professions. And then we think of our brothers from the Sydney area, many thousands coming in over the weekends. We could tell you about many of the highlights of our building. Perhaps one of the biggest ones was our first major concrete pour on the some of the factory floors right behind us here. Everybody was very tense. We got up at 3:30 in the morning. It was pitch black. We had our breakfast. Everybody out with torches. Then the big concrete pump arrived. We were batching our own concrete, and for the first hour or two, we couldn't get a thing out the other end of the pump. And everybody said, well, it's your concrete. You don't know how to batch concrete. And after 2 hours, we began to believe them. But all of a sudden, they found their pump was blocked up. And it wasn't our concrete at all. Then it started, and it rained that night. And many brothers who had started at 3 o'clock, 3:30 that morning, were still working at 11 and 12 o'clock at night. And that's been the spirit that has highlighted our project right through, the marvellous, fine cooperation of people. As a building committee, right from the very beginning, we established one major factor, that spirituality, the spirit, was going to be the major thing, not the building. We did not want one spiritual casualty. And we feel that today we can say that we've accomplished that goal. Now, some of the brothers who contributed quite a lot to the planning of the building was Brother Flack, of course, who right from the very inception designed, perhaps Dennis, how many buildings did you design? We designed about 2 or 3 for Strathfield, and then out here, perhaps what has been the outstanding factor as far as you're concerned?
I think the thing that has stood out in my mind is the marvellous spirit of cooperation that has been evident. We've had such a variety of brothers from different backgrounds and different situations, old and young, and there's been this marvellous spirit of cooperation. It really hit me just how much it stands out, because we tend to take it for granted. We're with it every day, but I was taking a businessman around, and he saw the many different brothers working in different areas, and he saw the happy spirit that was there. And he said, well, this is really what strikes me, the fact that you have people working here day in, day out, rubbing shoulders so constantly, and yet you don't have the friction, you don't have the problems that is so evident in the world. And when we think of it, it wasn't just a weekend activity or a week or a month, but we're talking about years in which we worked together, we ate together, then we go off to the congregation meetings together. Sometimes we'd be witnessing together in the same group study together, and all sorts of background and situations. And then that cooperation in the actual work, brothers prepared to leave their trades, none of this arguments that's in the world today about demarcation disputes and things like that. If there was work in a certain area, even if it wasn't a brother's trade, he pitched in. And that spirit was obviously Jehovah's spirit at work, and that really thrilled me and makes me very happy to have been a part of that marvellous spirit of cooperation.
Thank you, Brother Dennis. Brother John Meredith worked very hard in the early stages of the planning of Strathfield, and then coming out to this area here. Brother Meredith, what did you find was outstanding?
Well, I think the most outstanding thing was when we were really pushing to build a building at Strathfield, because that seemed to be the indication from the governing body. We went to the council with a plan. The council were quite finicky about it. It cost us quite a lot of money. They made a decision, and we then appealed that decision. Again, it cost us money. We then came out here, and this one seemed to be a little bit of a flyer, I think, when we decided to come and talk to the local council. We spoke to them quite at length about what we wanted to do and how big it was to be, and said, well, it seems all right. You'll have to pay a fee, of course. So we're a little bit concerned about that. We didn't want to waste a lot of money. He came back and said, it's going to cost you $100. that was quite a relief after the thousands we'd spent at Strathfield. But all the way through we can see the cooperation that we received from the authorities then when we started to work out here. We were involved, we had to put a sewage treatment plant in. We went to the State Pollution Control Commission and they gave us approvals for that. They told us how to go about doing things. In fact, right throughout the operation of the building and what was going up, we could see the cooperation that we were getting from secular authorities. It was quite evident that Jehovah's Spirit was here, and I think that we all appreciated that and we were prepared to work in harmony with what Jehovah's direction was.
Thank you, Brother Meredith. Brother Peter Webb left his business up in Queensland, left his home, came down here with his family, worked a number of years. Brother Peter, how do you feel today?
Well, I certainly feel, Brother Max, that Jehovah's Spirit has been upon this operation here. And when I accepted my assignment, there was no thought of a building here, so I didn't know really what I was accepting. And I think this applied to so many of the brothers. And some of the experiences, we have many where we believe Jehovah was directly operating in certain directions. One I'd just like to mention was when we started off on the roadworks, and we had actually purchased the grader that was just over the back there. And of course you need a grader operator then to work on the roads. And we were just doing some work on the grader to get it in shape for work. And a brother from Tasmania rings up and says, I'm out of work and I'm a grader operator. Could you use me if I come up to the site? And of course that was within just a few days after the grader arrived on the site. And following that up, the 2-week arrangements where brothers come in from various states, we found there was a grader operator on each busload that came in. So for a period of a couple of months we had a grader operator all the time, an experienced brother. So that certainly shows that Jehovah blesses our efforts and raises up the brothers that are required at the time.
Thank you.
I'd just like to mention too, Max, there's a little confession I'd like to make. You mentioned about that first concrete pour that was where the pump wouldn't actually pump the concrete, and there was a problem with the pump. We felt that was so. But, and I've never told anyone about this before, so you're the first one to hear of it. Because everyone was blaming the concrete, I went back up to the office for a while and went through all the calculations on the quantities that were to be used in gravel, sand and cement. And in going back through this, and you remember how many times we double-checked everything, but nobody ever checked that work that I had done in those calculations.
We thought you were just about perfect, Brother Webb.
And I had actually made a mistake in that, and those first 3 truckloads of concrete would have been under strength had the pump pumped them onto the floor. And I found this out. I didn't tell anybody at the time. I wasn't too much ashamed to do that. Then because the time elapsed and we ended up having to use that on the cables in the ground there, and if you digged it up and test it, you'd find it's only about 20 MPa instead of 25. So that would prove that it was wrong. But we corrected the situation right there and then we got the higher strength concrete through, and by that time they had corrected the pump and they'd pumped it. And so from that time onwards, there wasn't one suspended slab that went under the required strength. But it just shows even on things where we make a mistake like that, Jehovah can still operate and still correct the things. He uses other means, and we come up all right at the finish.
Brother Griggs spent much time on our building here, left his business in South Australia, his home, and came over here and lived with us. Brother Griggs, how do you feel about your time with the building?
Brother Max, one of the outstanding things I see is a building that can bring credit to any builder and to any group of tradesmen that have worked on it, and by worldly standards it's of top quality. Now that's something to be very proud of, but it reminds me also of the scripture in Psalm 127 that says it's fine to have such a building, but unless it's Jehovah that blesses that building, it's to no avail that the workers have worked hard on it. So right from the word go, our family involvement here, we found that this building was giving our family a new direction, or confirming a direction of our lives that we were taking. We felt that at last there was some purpose in what we were doing here, that certainly we saw our young children growing up in an environment that was very, very worthwhile, and I'm very thankful today to see them having come through teenage years, as my son did while here, and my daughter growing up too, and all of us looking back on an experience that has been worthwhile because Jehovah's blessing was on the building. Now that's just from a family viewpoint for myself, but I see it also in looking out in the audience and meeting all of the young men and women and others that have come and spent time here as well, hearing ones that have gone pioneering from this experience, have married and have become very dedicated servants of Jehovah, others that are here at Bethel and taking up permanent assignments here in the Bethel family. All of that has come because the work of building here has given them a positive direction in their lives, and that's possible. The world can build fantastic buildings too. It has craftsmen, it has builders and tradesmen that build fine quality work, but they don't have buildings where Jehovah has blessed the efforts of the builders to the degree that we have here. And we are so happy to be sharing today in a dedication program where young men and women, and older men and women too, that have shared in the work, have found great value and direction from the work that they've put in here in this project.
Thanks very much. We would like to hear from so many of our brothers, but our time has gone, and probably that has been the most thrilling aspect of our building. Not just the building, but what the building has done for people. Many of those brothers, as Brother Griggs just mentioned, are in the pioneer service now. Many have come into Bethel. So we are convinced that Jehovah has blessed our move to Ingleburn or Denham Court. We felt Jehovah's direction in the selection of the site here. We felt Jehovah's blessing during the building program, and we've felt Jehovah's blessing in the past months since we have occupied the premises. And we pray that Jehovah God will continue to bless the preaching and teaching work so that we can continue to use our building here to Jehovah's praise and honor.
So now we invite you to listen to the dedication song.
Faithful and true.
Thank you very much, brothers. That truly is a very beautiful song, isn't it?